Hey, 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 everybody. Great to see you. We got a revolutionary one for you tonight. We have one. Well, quite honestly, I actually never thought that I was going to do this one. I don't know exactly why it took me so long. Actually, I do know exactly why it took me so long. It took me so long because, quite frankly, I was afraid to touch this one. I really was. I was literally afraid, as a Son of Sam researcher, who does not believe in the cult theory, I was actually afraid to touch Brooklyn. Brooklyn has always been to me, as a non-cult theorist, the third rail of Son of Sam. And why do I say that? Well, because if there was a potential issue that was going to prove me wrong, prove the non-cult theory wrong, well, it was always going to be found in Brooklyn. Why do I say that? Well, we've already completely debunked all the Yonkers information, right? Untermeyer Park has nothing whatsoever to do with Son of Sam. We have shown that Berkowitz wrote the letters. We showed that there was no 22 disciples of hell, that the king and duke were names of German shepherds. We found that he didn't know John Carr or the Carr family. John Carr was found out of a phone book. I mean, the things that we found up in Yonkers were amazing. And of course, Yonkers and the investigation up in Yonkers is basically kicked. Not much more to find out. We've already spoken to all the people that matter. But there was always Brooklyn, waiting, like a specter in the night, hidden away. Mysterious, suspicious, and of course, as I said before, scary. I was actually worried that this was going to prove me wrong. And yes, sometimes I do get petty like that, and I'm afraid to look for information that, well, that would prove me wrong. But as an honest Son of Sam researcher, you guys know that I tread where no one else goes. And so I finally decided to open up the Brooklyn police files the other day. And I was shocked at what I found. I found that we have been, guys, completely hoodwinked by Mr. Maury Terry once again in The Ultimate Evil. We're going to show you today. And in fact, this is going to be part one of probably two, maybe three shows. Okay. This is so information dense, and we have so much to unpack and deal with. And I have done so much work this week putting together this slideshow that when I was done, I was up to almost 80 slides. Okay. And usually it takes me 2 hours to get through 30. So I have decided, along with my partner for this series, John Catalano, that we are going to break this up into two shows, possibly three, so we could actually sit here, breathe with the material, and unpack it, and also present it to you in a way that's digestible. So, as I always like to say, it ain't about me. It's about we. So may I introduce to you one of the great minds right now in modern Son of Sam research, a true kindred spirit, my brother in the investigation, and also a person who has become a good friend to me, the great John Catalano. John, how are you, sir?
Hey, good evening, everybody.
So, John, tell me what your thoughts on, well, tell me what tell me. I told the audience that I was honest with the audience. I was afraid to touch this stuff. I was afraid to look at it because I thought, well, this is going to be the end. I'm going to find about the yellow Volkswagen was real and the Cecilia Davis story was real. And I didn't want to touch it. I was afraid to. Did you have any misgivings about this? How did you approach this?
Well, absolutely. Well, the Brooklyn shooting is a weird one because, believe it or not, there, there were a couple of moving pieces. Uh, Even though it wasn't exactly at the same time of the shooting, there were people spotted pulling in, pulling out, circling the park, by the highway, by the park benches.
Right.
So it could very easily be interpreted uh, in a different light than what actually happened. So up until
Ab-
recently, uh, I believed that at the minimum there were two shooters at in the Brooklyn in the park that night. But as we're going to see tonight, um, I think we can have a clearer picture of what was actually reported and investigated.
Right, I think so too. And of course, we have to thank whoever was the person behind getting these files for us in the first place, whoever put out the people versus David Berkowitz, the Queen's DA dump, because this has been devastating to the cult theory. But forget about the cult theory and the devastation of that. It almost doesn't even matter anymore, John. What matters is that we're finding out things about these crimes that we never knew before, factual stuff that is so completely new and interesting that's why I call this the golden age of Son of Sam research.
Absolutely. And once again, you know, I'm not a person that will commit to something and not be flexible. But I welcome seeing any kind of new information, any kind of new evidence, a report, a video, witness testimony to contradict anything we go over the next couple
right.
of shows. Yeah.
Exactly. Excuse me. I just swallowed wrong. Give me a second, please.
Yeah.
Had my little my little cough mute button.
I'm absolutely willing to be surprised and to review any new evidence.
Me too, and I want to put out there to the Maury heads who are watching this that we're going to put out Maury challenges, because we want to challenge you guys, right? We've done this research. We want to challenge you guys to contradict us using the same materials, of course, because this is all we all have to work with. You can't come to me with the words from the ultimate evil to prove me wrong. That's just not. That's what I call the circle jerk. That ain't working anymore. But John, another reason why I wanted you on this is because I'm calling you my color commentator, because you actually grew up in this neighborhood, not too far from the shooting, and in fact, your aunt and uncle were actually in the ultimate evil as witnesses to this, correct?
Absolutely. My aunt and uncle lived. Their terrace actually faced the park and the shooting scene. My two grandparents lived 3 blocks away from the park also, and I am from the neighborhood. And there were many times in my childhood that I was in that park. I knew it inside out, and I could visualize just from reading a report exactly what they're talking about and where that stuff is. So.
Right, and that's what's so important about doing this show. And I think, you know, once we're done with this series of shows, it may pay for us to do a Google Earth type of show where we show these sites and all the addresses and all that kind of stuff. Because one thing I strive to do for the audience is be as thorough as possible, completely thorough, complete analysis, and this way you guys can in fact check what we're doing and see whether we're doing the right thing or not. But John, it's great to have you, and because we have so much to do, I think we might as well just get on into it. What do you think?
Yeah, I'd just like to mention one other thing. It helps a lot when you're reading any kind of witness reports from this scene, from this crime scene. You kind of have to remember the times. Talking about July 30th, 1977. 5 weeks prior, Berkowitz had put out another letter to Jimmy Breslin, the famous "What have you got for July 29th" letter. Mm-hmm. Everybody was still very much on edge, believe it or not.
On a hair trigger.
Yes. And people tended to get paranoid when they saw stuff happening. And it's important to keep the frame of mind in context.
You know, on that note, actually, I also wanted to talk a little bit about the sociology of that neighborhood. Now, forgive me if I'm making generalizations here, but I've always figured that Italian neighborhoods, which that neighborhood was, and I don't know if it still is, but it was solidly Italian in those years, they were pretty insular, and they kept an eye out on the neighborhood. And one thing I'm noticing about this Moscowitz report, above all others, the sheer amount of witnesses that there were and people giving reports about things that happened a week prior. So the eyes were glued to this scene for sure.
Absolutely. It was an old school Italian neighborhood, and it did have that small town feel to it, and people did watch out. And like I said, at that time, you couldn't open a newspaper or turn on the 5 o'clock news without there being a Son of Sam story. This was on everybody's mind constantly.
Right. And that night in particular, because of the anniversary, sort of cat and mouse game that was going on between Disco Dave and the city. Correct. So very, very good intro, John. I say we just get into it, because boy, do we have, well, a lot of information to unpack. Well, guys, it's all about Brooklyn. And of course, we did a show about the photographs of Son of Sam where we showed these really poignant, sad, but yet very amazing photographs of the scene that night. And I chose this one, of course, as my intro because I don't know, it's just to me it's one of the saddest ones. It's the car left, the two victims, of course, in the hospital. Probably most of the witnesses are gone. The police have secured the scene, and it just gives you an idea of like just the feel of what happened that night. It's to me this is an amazing photograph. But we have to lay the foundation, guys. And I'll be doing a lot of talking tonight. I'll be doing most of the reading, probably all of the reading, and John, of course, will be here for color commentary and also to give his thoughts because again, having a person who grew up in that neighborhood is invaluable to us as Son of Sam researchers. And also, this guy's amazing. I mean, this is one of the very few people out there who, like me, was once a Maury Terry fan and who has now gone full circle. And not because we hate Maury Terry. We just are open to new information and updating our operating systems. So that's why I like working with John, amongst many other reasons. He's just a good guy. All right.
I welcome any evidence that proves me wrong. I'd love to
Me too.
to read a new report and get excited about something.
Me too. And the Maury fans are actually going to have a chance to do that in tonight's show. Not because I didn't do a thorough job of investigating, but just because I was a little lazy in how many things I put up on the screen. So we'll get to that. It'll make sense in a minute. Laying that foundation. So Maury painted a very convincing picture of the Brooklyn shooting, guys. I mean, let's face it. Even if you were iffy on the cult information coming out of Yonkers, even if the Billy the Artist story was a little bit suspect to you, well, we could not deny certain facts from the Brooklyn scene as given to us by Maury Terry, of course. What were those facts? Well, Berkowitz drove away from the scene, chasing the cops, only seen 2 minutes away from the shooting by Cecilia Davis, right? We also learned about this mysterious yellow Volkswagen that was seen all over that area with 2 people in it, sunglasses, guy carrying bags, all sorts of stuff. We heard about the story about a Volkswagen leaving the scene and almost getting into a car crash and then getting quickly onto the Belt Parkway and disappearing. And all of these things, when taken together, painted a very convincing picture that Berkowitz was not the lone shooter that night. I again was afraid to touch Brooklyn because this is the third rail of Son of Sam research. But modern, Go ahead, John.
Saying it was convincing is an understatement. Reading that book, there's no way that you can read the chapters that cover the Brooklyn scene and not say there were multiple shooters.
Slam dunk. Right, slam dunk. That was the biggest thing for me was Brooklyn. But modern research is showing his portrayal to be problematic, not to use that horrible term, right? That the left loves so much, problematic. But it really is a very apropos term here. His portrayal in the book is problematic at best. Okay, that's the best thing that I can say about it. And I think that you guys are going to agree with me as well. Using the same police files that Maury did, okay, this is very important. We are using the same exact treasure trove of files that Maury had access to. We don't have any extra ones. We don't have ones that he didn't have, that he had, right? We have the exact same information that he was using. We're going to show that the VW sightings, the Volkswagen sightings, were not significant as we once thought. We will see evidence pointing to Berkowitz leaving the scene of the crime, just as he said he did. There were eyewitnesses to it. In addition, okay, we're going to see that Cecilia Davis's story, this is important now, as told by Maury, the story of Cecilia Davis as told by Maury, that story now is in serious, serious doubt. Simply put, we're going to show that when the police files are taken in totality, guys, stories like the yellow Volkswagen are diluted. Now, what do I mean by that? Maury cherry-picked the VW stories that he wanted to use to sell his narrative. It's obvious after doing the research that we have done, okay? But when you take all of these police files in their totality, and you realize that they were looking for a gold Vega, a Chevy, a blue Oldsmobile, a Lincoln Town Car, a black Volkswagen, a Ford Maverick, okay? They were looking for those cars just as much as they were looking for a yellow VW. Taken in the totality, the yellow VW story is diluted. Okay. And the new picture, to the dismay of many cult theorists, is actually the old picture. Disco Dave did it. Okay. John, any thoughts on this so far?
Nope. That's exactly where we should be right now.
Cool. All right. Well, let's take what Disco Dave had to say. All right. So this, I think, is important to lay the foundation, because let's get what the perpetrator of the crime had to say about it. So this is a little hard to read, but I've already read it through a few times, so I'm pretty familiar with it. So I will just dictate it, and hopefully it'll make sense. So I was out hunting. It was about 2 a.m. I drove on Belt to Howard Beach. I looked around, then to Canarsie, then continued to Bensonhurst. It was now 2 a.m. Okay. I parked on Bay 17th between Shore Parkway and Cropsey. That's exactly where he got the ticket. I had to go out and kill somebody. I parked at a fire hydrant. I even saw the police give me a summons. I had a feeling they would. I was at Bay 17th and Shore Parkway. I watched them for about 10 minutes. Then I went back and saw I don't know what that says. I was wearing a denim jacket and pants and work shoes, a brown shirt, light. I took ticket off windshield and put it in car and went back to the park. There were young people in the dead end street. I sat on a bench. I had a 44 Bulldog loaded. I then saw Stacey Moscowitz and her boyfriend on swings. They went to the car on Bayshore. The other car was up farther. The other car was
Tommy Zeno.
Right. When I saw that, they went to, I can't read that. I waited them and went to the car and fired into car. I fired 4 times at Miss Moskowitz, and I one other round. I don't know what this says. So basically he's saying, look, we're not going to go through all this. We have actually a better version right here, because it's just too hard to read. But essentially he just says that he shot them. He walked back through the park, and then it back to his car, which was where he parked it. Okay. And then we're going to on Bay 17th. And then he just basically drove around all night, and he got back to Yonkers at 10:30 the next morning. Okay. I paraphrase that.
So he never mentioned pulling away from the
never mentions pulling away. He does mention standing there and watching the police, but he doesn't mention pulling away. All right, fine. That's just his version of the story. Let's hear another one. Of course, this is from his letters to Abrahamson. I remember my last shooting in which Stacey Moscowitz was slain. I saw her and her boyfriend making out in the car. Then they left the car, walked over the bridge, and went along the path by the water. All stuff that they did, by the way. Okay, so how did he know that, right? Unless he was there. After about 20 minutes, they returned to the car, made out some more, then came back to where I was by the swings. I watched Stacey on the swing, and then she stopped swinging. Her and her date then started to kiss passionately for several minutes. At this time, I, too, was sexually aroused. I had an erection. Shortly after their deep kissing, they went back to the car. If my memory is correct, they made out a little more and then just sat inside the car talking. Now I then quietly crept up alongside the car, but a little more to the rear. I had my gun out, aimed it at the middle of Stacey's head, and fired. One bullet struck her head and another nicked her. I didn't even know she was shot because she didn't say anything, nor did she move. Then I got in my car and drove off. Okay, so he hedges a little here, right? Because his car wasn't right there. He had to run to his car, but he didn't write the whole thing about running to the car. Right. All right, fine. So we have a very basic story here. What Berkowitz says. It matches almost exactly what Robert Violante says. It matches exactly what Tommy Zeno says, and it matches also what Cecilia Davis says in the sense of like, what he was at the car, saw him getting the ticket, and then he waited 10 minutes and all that kind of stuff. But we have some issues.
It certainly matters what she told the police.
Correct. Exactly. So the biggest way that Maury Terry, we'll just get into it. The Cecelia Davis hoax. Okay. And of course, this is Cecelia Davis. And here she is walking her famous dog Snowball, and nobody's allowed to look at that right there. And nobody's allowed to look at her camel toe. All right. So anyway, I guess in the 70s that was just like the style. All right. Anyway, we always got to throw a little humor in there, John. All right, the importance of the Davis story. So listen, we all have to admit it ourselves. We all have to be honest with ourselves about this, right? This is part of this whole deal with learning about this crime in this new way of taking it out of the cult theory and just going back to the old school is almost like deprogramming in a sense, right? We were all cultists in a way. We were in the cult of Maury Terry, and cult theorists. We need to be deprogrammed, and part of the deprogramming is going to be, of course, looking at each one of these stories that are the pillars of the cult theory and realizing how we were lied to and snookered. So the Berkowitz drove away story is a pillar of the ultimate evil. John, would you agree with me on that?
Without that part of the story, there's not much. So if Berkowitz does not leave that scene, Cecilia Davis's timeline is completely meaningless.
It's completely meaningless.
Yeah. So
right, but Maury uses her story as an absolute pillar, a bedrock pillar of the Brooklyn story, which then, of course, the Brooklyn story is a pillar of the cult thesis, of the multiple shooter thesis. So Scott Cardinal's funny. Can you kindly please send me that photo so I can investigate this camel toe theory? I'll send it to you, man. I'll send it to you. Okay. All right. So, but disturbing new evidence, or should I say lack of evidence, is casting serious shade on this story. And I got to just say as an aside, John, I cannot believe that I'm the first person to realize this. Of course, we only got these files recently. But I can't believe that the people in the Maury Terry camp weren't pouring through these files to prove, right? I mean, that would be the first thing that I would do.
Well, and from what I understand, he wasn't one to be very giving with his files to begin with, and I just think a lot of people, including myself, just put a lot of faith in him and really didn't question and insist on seeing backup documentation on a lot of these accusations. Yeah.
Right. And it's insane that all this stuff comes out in the Queen's DA, and we finally, as Son of Sam researchers, have all the golden, it's like the Ark of the Covenant for us. And it's like the people who are not looking at it the most are the ones who love the ultimate evil the most. It's very strange because any cursory glance at any of these documents completely demolishes the cult thesis. I have not found one thing in any. Have you, John?
Manny, I have FOIA requested information from the FBI, the Justice Department, spoken to NYPD, high-ranking detectives. There is not a morsel of evidence that the process church of the final judgment had absolutely anything to do with David Berkowitz. It's a complete joke.
Right.
It's embarrassing, honestly.
It actually is embarrassing. As a almost 50-year-old man, I have to say that I'd be embarrassed if I still believed in this stuff. But anyway, now this is me personally speaking. I'm not speaking for my boy John here. He can agree with me if he wants, but this is me going out on a limb. I personally am going public and on record to say that Maury fabricated this story and thus his entire Brooklyn thesis. I said it. There, I said it. Maury made it up. All right. And how are we going to prove this? Well, we're going to prove it by showing you the evidence. So the first thing that we have to do is show you Maury's portrayal out of the book. And remember, we're dealing now with her portrayal of that evening, of that evening's activity. And this is a pillar of the ultimate evil because she talks about Berkowitz driving away, okay, from the scene of the crime. Miss Cecilia Davis, 49. A widow and native of Austria is returning from a night out with a friend, Howard Bohan. She is riding in the passenger seat as his car turns off the Shore Parkway service road and onto Bay 17th Street and slows while they look for a parking space. They initially think that they can squeeze into the spot in front of Berkowitz's Galaxy, but seeing the ticket already on his windshield and noting the proximity of the hydrant, they continue about 75 yards up the block and triple park near Mrs. Davis's building. Now, 75 yards? I just noticed that for the first time, John. That's
Well,
3/4 of a length of a football field.
yeah, her address was 262, right? Base 17. So I think that's from where his car was parked. So that could be close. I had originally thought her address was 290,
Uh-huh.
which would be a lot closer,
Right.
but that may be accurate. I'm not exactly sure.
But but are you getting my problem here? If she was 75 yards away from the fire hydrant, right there, that would be impossible for her to see all the stuff that she said she saw at the fire hydrant. She was 3/4 of a football field length away.
Okay, yeah.
I mean, are you seeing that? I mean, I never noticed this before, just reading this for the first time.
I had
So
thought when she was walking the dog, she was closer to him.
no, the Berkowitz driving away bit happens when she's in the car. Now we know that this car is 75 yards up the block. Okay, fine. We'll leave this out. This is a huge problem for me.
Okay.
And I think any law enforcement officer, knowing now that she was 3/4 of a football field length away from the fire hydrant, would also have a problem with that. But let's move on. So she's 75 yards up the block in Triple Parks near Mrs. Davis's building, number 262, blocking the one-way road. Their car is now between Berkowitz's Ford and the police car, which is still on the street near 262 Bay 17th. All right.
Right.
While talking with Howard, Mrs. Davis, aware that their car is blocking the avenue, keeps an eye on the road behind them. She suddenly sees a young man emerge from a courtyard, lean across the Ford's windshield, and like any motorist preparing to drive off, angrily remove the ticket. Now, if she's 75 yards away, how does she see this?
You know what? That's a great point, and that is a dark block. There's a lot of trees on that block. I actually never really paid attention to that little detail, but
I never paid attention to that detail. And John P. correctly says 75 yards is 225 feet away. So now Maury's expecting us to believe that she has telescopic eyes. Okay, let's carry on. He is wearing a denim jacket and pants, just like he says he wore that night. The man opens the driver's door, which is against the curb, and puts the ticket inside the car. I don't know how she sees that. Right? He then defiantly, openly leans against the ajar door and watches intently for 7 minutes as patrolman Catalano, laughing and joking with his partner Logan, writes the second and third tickets on Bay 17th Street that night. When Catalano finishes, he climbs back into his police cruiser. Now, here's the nut meat, guys, okay? Mrs. Davis, meanwhile, has invited Howard inside for coffee and asks if he will accompany her while she walks her dog. Howard declines, looking at his watch and pointing out that it is already 2:20 a.m. and he is due at his supermarket job early in the morning. As the police who are in front of Howard's car start to drive off, Mrs. Davis sees the young man down the block quickly enter his Galaxy and speed up behind her and Howard. Clearly agitated, he blares his horn loudly several times to get by. So this is the beginning, John, of the Berkowitz driving away thesis. So
yes.
Berkowitz now has got into his car and is chasing the police. I don't know why he would do that, but he's now chasing the police. Okay, so Mrs. Davis climbs out and walks behind Howard's car and in front of the Ford. As Howard drives off, she stands on the curb, looking at the profile of the impatient young man in the Galaxy as she passes. She notices the denim jacket and the dark, short, cropped hair. All right, great, fine. That's cool. She can see a guy 5 feet in front of her as she's walking in front of the car, and she that was Berkowitz in his car. He was wearing a denim jacket and he did have short cropped hair. So that all sounds good to me.
Manny, the reason why Maury emphasized that he was chasing the police was the whole theory, if you remember, was he was supposed to be a lookout.
Correct.
He wanted to make sure the police were out of the area.
You know, one question no one asks is where did he park when he left the area? Where did he park? He certainly couldn't have parked closer to the park.
Yeah, but like I had mentioned to you, I had read somewhere, and I can't remember if it wasn't in the Ultimate Evil, that he had parked around the block in a driveway for the buildings opposite Cecilia Davis. There was a driveway in that next block. But I don't remember where I read it, and I haven't seen it in
anywhere else
report or in any of the police reports. So I'm going to assume that maybe that's something that probably didn't happen.
Right, because again, Maury Terry should have asked Berkowitz, "Where'd you park?" and he should have put that into this report, into this book. All right, so fine. The Galaxy follows both Howard and the police across Cropsey Avenue intersection, where it passes Howard, who observes it going by. Still on the trail, and I notice now there's no Howard police reports, by the way, John, in any
Yeah.
of this Moskowitz. There's no Howard Bohan police reports. Okay, still on the trail
Convenient.
of the, huh? Conveniently, right.
Yeah.
Still on the trail of the police car. So this is Berkowitz trailing the police. The Ford continues to the next intersection, Bay 17th and Bath Avenue, where both vehicles turn right. They are heading many blocks north and east of the Violante Auto and the park. It is approximately 2:21 a.m., just 14 minutes before the shooting will occur, and David Berkowitz is leaving the scene on the heels of the police. Mrs. Davis, who has watched the disappearing cars, then enters her first floor apartment. All right, so let's synopsis this, John. What can the audience glean from what we just read?
Well, like I said, in order for Maury's theory
No, John. What I want is just summarize what we just read for the audience. Just the main bullet points. What did Davis see?
Oh, well, she saw David Berkowitz receive the parking ticket, take the ticket off his windshield, and then eventually leave the scene and follow the police and park somewhere else. So the theory was, how could he have gotten back to the park and committed the murders?
Right, in all that time. But what we're dealing with here is mainly this whole issue of Berkowitz driving away. So we just read it in The Ultimate Evil, and for that reason, we all believed it. Let's
Oh,
actually read the actual police reports, okay? Because this is what true researchers do, and this is the only thing we have to go by now, unless there's some secret diary somewhere, right? This is all we have to go by. So Moryites, this is what you have to go by. Manny, this is what I have to go by. Let's just see what Cecilia Davis said.
Can I just ask a quick question before
Of
we go
course.
there? So, getting back to Howard,
Mm-hmm.
let's say you're Howard. A week later, Berkowitz is arrested. Naturally, Cecilia Davis must have told Howard that she spoke to the police, and you remember that guy that night that was
Right.
honking the horn? Howard was never compelled to tell his story to the police or to the newspaper, for that matter. I mean,
Right.
does that even make sense?
You're right, because there is absolutely no report of the police talking to Howard, and I would imagine that they would want to talk to him as like Cecilia Davis was one of the biggest witnesses next to Tommy Zano. Why wouldn't they talk to Howard Bohan? You're absolutely right.
I mean, considering the timeline, for those events to make sense, Howard should have said, "Hey, wait a second, you're missing a part of this story," and naturally,
Right. He never brings it up. You're right. No one ever brought this up, but we haven't gotten there yet. Let's just read what actually Cecilia Davis actually said to the police that night, or when they interviewed her. He was walking as witness describes, like a cat, very slow and almost like a soldier with one step in front of each other. His face is described as slick or oily with high cheekbones. His eyes appeared dark and he looked to be almost handsome. He had almost no sideburns and his face was smooth. His nose was not pointed and not too large. Witness then noticed a portable radio in his right hand held tightly against his right leg. His hands appeared small, but he was able to hide almost the whole thing. Okay. Now, as he approached closer, he turned his head away, and Witness noticed his shirt had a tiny spot on it, and his shirt was tucked under his jacket. He appeared well built. However, she further stated he had something abnormal about his stomach. There looked like a swelling or something tucked under his shirt. He turned and walked into the courtyard in the direction of 16th Street. Witness now noticed that the portable no longer looked like a radio. Witness stated that it looked like something else, perhaps a gun. Now, this is their investigation, and I think personally the cops put this in her head that it was perhaps a gun, but who knows? Witness then asked the undersigned to place his gun in different position in his right hand. When the gun was pointed barrel up or forward, Witness stated that it was the way it looked, except that it was squarer. Okay, blah, blah, blah. We're going to go down here. Witness then went quickly into the house. As she was removing dog collar from dog, she heard what sounded like a loud bang and a car horn blowing continuously. This took place 5 minutes later.
Right.
So, John, let's deal with that.
So I remember that it was supposed to have been 2.5 minutes later.
Right.
And it was physically impossible for Berkowitz to get from the car to the shooting scene.
Right, in 2.5 minutes, except now I know we're dealing with another issue here other than the driving away, but this is important. Here in this police report, we're seeing that it took 5 minutes.
Correct.
Which is incredibly long time. More than enough time for Berkowitz to get there, change it, roll up his sleeves, put on a wig even if he wanted to, and all that kind of stuff, right?
Absolutely.
But of course, okay. When asked by the undersigned if she could identify this man, she stated she would never forget him. When asked if she would allow a police artist to draw his picture from her description, she finally agreed. The undersigned asked if she saw any other people in the street at this time. So any other people in the street, right? This is important. That might have seen him, and she stated there were none other outside. When asked by the undersigned if there were, now the undersigned is the cops, okay? If there were anything at all she could think about that night that might help us find a witness, she stated, I saw the police when I first came in. She came home about 2 a.m. and remembers seeing the police giving tickets to a car on the hydrant down the street and that a woman ran out to move a double parked auto. End of report.
Yes. There were other people double parked running out to avoid getting a ticket.
And she says it's the only person that she mentions is a woman who ran out to move a double parked auto. Okay. So in this police report, there is absolutely zero mention of Berkowitz driving away. Now, we have another one. The undersigned, as a result of a telephone call from a female, responded together with Detective J. Smith, BBS, to an apartment of the witness neighbor. At that apartment, the undersigned, after convincing witness to tell entire story, received the following statement. So now, this is Cecilia Davis's entire story. Okay? Okay. Parked on the service road were two autos of what appeared to be a couple in each auto. On the park side of the street was another auto with a couple. Witness did not walk close to auto in fear that someone might step out. This took place at approximately 2:35 a.m., 7/31/77, as witness walked back to Bay 17th Street and turned around. She noticed a male was following her about 30 feet behind. Witness kept looking back and noticed that the male was about 30 years old, wearing a blue denim jacket and blue denim pants. Also, she noticed his shirt was a blue-gray and his shoes matched a blue denim type. Witness stopped with her dog at the courtyard entrance to 262 Bay 17th Street and watched as the male walked closer up Bay 17th. He was athletic looking and appeared with his jacket to have a tight or slim waistline. His shoulders appeared to be broad and his hair was cut short and neat and close to his ears. He was walking in a very strange way. Witness described his walk as very careful and 1 foot touching the pavement at each time. Any notice here of Berkowitz driving away, John?
Nope. And it's funny because her story is actually a little different now also, because now she saw him on Bay 17th and Shore Parkway. Then she was walking back to her apartment with the dog.
With the dog, right, exactly. She was no longer in front of her house with the dog when she saw him.
So this is the second time she's seeing him, correct?
I don't know. It doesn't say. In fact, if this is the only time she see him, we just caught Maury in another lie. Because she's
the first time she had seen him by his car, and then going into the court that cuts between the buildings.
According to Maury, right. So this is highly interesting, but in either case, these are the only two Cecilia Davis police statements in the entire files. And in neither of them does she say that someone drove away. Now, someone could argue with me, well, why would she associate the car driving away with Berkowitz? And that's a good argument, but then why did she put this very mundane thing in here that she saw a woman driving out to move a double parked auto? If she included that little statement, which she knew could have nothing to do with Son of Sam because it was a woman, why wouldn't she tell the cops, John, about this dramatic guy who blew the horn after getting a ticket? Meanwhile, she was 75 yards away.
It makes absolutely no sense, Manny. There's no reason Why, that wouldn't be in one of these police reports.
It's
And I'm
in
sorry.
no police reports. And I want to give this is the Maury challenge to the Maury heads. Do some research, guys. Try to prove me wrong. This is like your favorite pastime. All right. Go to the police reports and find the one where Cecilia Davis talks about Berkowitz driving away. Okay. Now, furthermore, this is where it gets very interesting. I had the great Queen Ruby. Okay. And Ruby is a top notch researcher. Anytime I need something looked up in the newspaper, I just say, Ruby, Cecilia Davis. Have at it. And within 5 minutes, all of a sudden on Twitter, I'm getting back 100 articles about Cecilia Davis. So I put into Ruby, I said, Ruby, find me articles with Cecilia Davis talking about the car driving away, because you figure that if this was a big story, right? If it was in the Ultimate Evil, that there would be some media reports about this, that Cecilia Davis was all over the media that first week, right? So here's my second Maury challenge. I only put up one article here, right? It's a very typical article. I challenge the Maury people to find me an article in the public domain. Very important what I'm about to say next. Not written by Maury Terry or sourced by Maury Terry. Find me an article written by an author other than Maury Terry that includes this story in it, because you won't find it. And this is just a typical one. Okay, so this is parking ticket leads to subject. And here we go. Here's the this whole story is about Cecilia Davis, right? She was out walking her dog. She noticed the man had a stiff something in his shoulder. The man got a good look at her. I don't know this man. 15 minutes later, she 15 minutes later, she turns on the car and hears the loud boom. So here's 15 minutes later, not even 2 minutes later. But in either case,
there are no media reports other than Maury Terry's that
zilch.
describe David Berkowitz leaving that scene and following the police.
Exactly.
There are none.
Bar none. So we don't need to go through this. If you guys want, I'm blocked on Twitter right now until Wednesday. I made a faux pas. So Twitter blocked me from posting, but I'll put all this up on my Twitter. And so this doesn't say anything about him driving away. And this whole article is about Cecilia Davis. And Ruby will attest to this. She sent me probably 20 articles. None of them talk about him driving away. But where do I find this story about him driving away? All of a sudden, it's in Maury Terry's article. Okay, right here. Let's see, right here. Indicates that too late. Report. Here we go, right here. Cecilia Davis also says she also later encountered a man she positively identified as Berkowitz as she was walking her dog on Bay 17th, just moments before. However, her report of her crucial first sighting of Berkowitz as he drove from the neighborhood earlier has not been revealed by authorities. So this is another more, huh?
They're keeping it secret?
Yeah, here's another Mauryism, right? Here's the only thing that the main pillar of his thesis, it's being revealed by authorities.
An unnamed unknown source.
Right, another unknown source that's withholding all this information. So this is the only place where we could find any reports of the Berkowitz driving away story, and it's only in Maury stories or stories that were sourced by Maury. In other words, another article took Maury's information and then reprinted it. So I don't know, John. I'm pretty convinced. I can be convinced the other way if the Maury fans come to us with compelling evidence, but they have to find it for these police files and media reports, and that's the only place.
So at this point, I'm going to have to say that he never left that scene. And knowing the area, 5 minutes was more than enough time for him to get to the park, walk around the park, walk towards Shore Parkway, stalk Stacey and Robert, and shoot the both of them. More than enough time.
Right, exactly like he says in his testimony. Right, that we played at the beginning. So I know it's very uncomfortable for people who still believe in the cult thesis to digest this type of stuff, and I know that people out there are going, bullshit, man. They're not showing the reports that show. Guys, go to the police reports and find Cecilia Davis's stuff. Do the work that I did. I'm not leaving anything out, because if I did, I know that you cracked researchers in the Maury Terry camp are going to find me out and expose me. So I was being triply, doubly, quadruply thorough on this. Go find me the report where Cecilia Davis actually tells the police about this happening. It doesn't exist. Go find me a newspaper article not written by Maury where you hear about this driving away. It doesn't exist. So I am officially calling bullshit on the Cecilia Davis story. She has been relegated to just another eyewitness who saw something, but whatever she saw that night, and she probably did see Berkowitz. It just points to Berkowitz doing it, because she said that 15 minutes later the shot happened, 5 minutes later the shot happened, but it wasn't 2 minutes, it wasn't 1 minute, none of that stuff. So I'm calling bullshit. John, do you have any thoughts, any final pronouncements on the Cecilia Davis?
Yeah, I think at this point, it's not being disrespectful to Maury Terry. It's just, it's just hard to keep going along with stuff that you just can never verify. There's always stuff of his that is just unverifiable. And let's face it, we've looked through these reports. I know we didn't miss anything. He even mentioned in The Ultimate Evil that Leifer interviewed Cecilia Davis. Where's that interview? Where's the report? Where's the recording of it? I'm more than willing to be wrong. Please prove me wrong. Let's see some evidence. But
Exactly.
At this point, there is none.
Exactly. And that's what all we're saying. We're finding this stuff. We think that we're earnest, and we're certainly doing this with honest intent. And the intent, of course, is to wash away this muddied conspiracy theory, which has gotten us exactly nowhere in 40 years. But look how far we've gotten, John, in just 6 months, right? Once we realized and changed our mindset that this actually didn't happen, then all of a sudden, like, we're just open, and the evidence shows it. But I'm saying that the Cecilia Davis story is bullshit. If someone wants to prove me wrong, I will have you on my show and we will do a complete show about it. That just shows my integrity. Please prove.
They're going to twist those words around on you. So maybe you should clarify the part that we can verify is bullshit.
Correct.
You did see something in someone,
yes.
And you probably saw Berkowitz get that ticket.
Right.
But the middle part of that story is very
right. The pillar of the story, which is Berkowitz driving away. That is what makes the Berkowitz have an accomplice, him driving away. Right. If he doesn't drive away, he has no accomplice.
Makes it very difficult to account for the timing.
Exactly. And of
someone
course,
else would have had to been there in the park.
Right. Exactly. And that's what we all, as cult theorists, hang our hat on. Berkowitz driving away. Well, in my opinion, we've just completely debunked that story. But again, I'm open to people correcting me. Find me the actual compelling, real evidence, not something from The Ultimate Evil, not something written by Maury Terry. I've already shown Maury Terry to be a liar, manipulator, a bullier, and an abuser. So his words mean nothing to me anymore. I need other verification. All right, John, well, let's go on to our next subject, and I think this is going to blow people's socks off. The Yellow VW hoax. Because, John, just like the Cecilia Davis Berkowitz driving away, the Yellow VW was a massive, massive part of the cult theory. Tell me about it.
Absolutely. And the Yellow Volkswagen appears a couple of times that night. Once prior to the shooting, I think the Vignottis see a Volkswagen pull up.
Well, right? we're gonna get to each story from The Ultimate Evil, but yeah, this VW story is one of the main pillars, again, with the Berkowitz drives away of the multiple shooter theory, because if Berkowitz was there in his Ford Galaxy and the shooter drove away in a yellow VW, as we were led to believe by Maury Terry's, well, quite frankly, massive cherry picking of the evidence, well, then of course the shooter was not Berkowitz, and Berkowitz had help. It just follows logically. If there was a yellow Volkswagen driving away, well, there was a second shooter, right? But how come none of us ever thought that maybe, just maybe, the yellow Volkswagen was just people hightailing it out of there, people who were partying and heard shots and got the hell out of there as soon as they heard shots? But it's not so simple. We actually found every police report that deals with this yellow VW story, and I think by the time we end, you guys out there in the audience are going to be absolutely flabbergasted of what we found out, because just like the Cecilia Davis hoax, the yellow VW turns out to be on a pillar made of sand. It's a complete fabrication. Maury Terry, in my opinion, cherry-picked, selectively edited, and in fact, we're going to see how he manipulated police reports, lied about police reports, in fact, in the book. I have the evidence. I'm going to show it to you to confirm his already preset narrative. So what we're going to do is we're going to get into this, so just for the audience's sake, just for pacing, remember, this show could be a 4-hour show. Okay. So what John and I have decided to do is break it up into a couple different shows. So today's show is going to be about the Cecilia Davis hoax, which we just did, and the Yellow VW hoax. But we're only going to be doing the first part of the Yellow VW hoax. We're going to talk about everything that Maury wrote about in The Ultimate Evil up to the moment of the shooting. Then that's where we're going to end our show, and we're going to continue our next show with the aftermath of the shooting and beyond. Believe me, I have done the most thorough research that has ever been done on this in the history of this since Maury Terry did his book, and of course since the NYPD did their investigation. And I challenge anybody to defy me on that one. All right, so let's deal with this, John. So what I've done is, Maury has his timeline, right, John? Right, John, as you know, starting at like 145 and all this kind of stuff.
Yes.
Right, and all this type. So how the story starts in The Ultimate Evil. So it actually starts a little earlier. We'll get into that a little later. But at 2:10, a young neighborhood girl, Michelle Michaels, is riding her bike on 17th Avenue near Bath Avenue, 2 blocks west of Berkowitz's car and 3 blocks north of where Violante and Stacey are parked. Looking behind her, Michelle notices she's being followed closely by a man in a small yellow car, model unknown. After keeping pace with Michelle for 2 blocks heading in direction of the park, the man pulls alongside and stares at her. Pedaling faster, she reaches her home and runs inside, but the man remains in front of the house for a few moments before continuing south towards the park area. Despite the hour, he was wearing sunglasses, like the man who was standing by the Parkway overpass a half an hour earlier, and has brownish short hair, high cheekbones, and a pointed chin. We'll get to that report. I'm not quite sure why I started with this report, but in either case, her report is actually not in the police reports. It's nowhere to be found. But I did find it in the New York Post. And here's the article about it. A 17-year-old Brooklyn girl who lives near the scene. She was followed in a yellow car. I wonder whether Maury Terry saw this and just reported on this, right? So this basically tells the same story. Is about 2:15 a.m. when wait a second, it's about 2:15. Okay, so he has it at 2:15 as well. And a yellow car starts to follow her. Okay, great. So Maury basically took this report and he put it in The Ultimate Evil, right? And then 15 minutes later, after the yellow car left her house, she heard 4 shots. All right, great. So let's retrace the steps of The Ultimate Evils, okay? So now here, 1:10. This is the Barnes story. 1:10. Paula Barnes was determined to find her lost bracelet. So dragging her reluctant husband behind with her, she re-entered the 17th Avenue Park and proceeded to search for it. They returned to their car, which was parked on the service road near Bay 16th shortly before 1 a.m. Paula and Robert, talking in their car, look down the service road and observe a yellow Volkswagen Beetle pull up to the park's entrance and watch as 2 people emerge from the car and walk into the park. The Barneses continue their conversation and leave the area at about 1:15 a.m. Remember this time, guys. This is going to be very important. But they wouldn't be the only people at the scene. Other couples were now beginning to arrive at the urban lovers lane. All right, so this is a story about a couple who he calls the Barnes. They were in the park earlier that evening. The woman loses her bracelet, so later on they go back to the park to try to look for it, and he has them there at 1 a.m., leaving at 1:15. All right, let's see the actual police report. Interview of Robert Balsamelli. So the Barnes is really the Balsamellis. On the above date at 12:15 hours, the assigned in the company of Detective J. Felitico interviewed the above at his residence. He stated that on Saturday evening, 7:30:77, he was with his girlfriend, Margaret Manfro, were parked in my auto on Shore Parkway. It was a 1974 Gold Vega. It had dealer plates on it. I parked there at about 11:30 p.m. Before that, we left my house and walked to the bocce court in the park where we sat in the dark on the bench. It was about 11:30, 11:40 p.m. We sat there for about 1 hour. The park was empty. We started to walk back to the car, and Margaret realized that she lost her bracelet. We returned to the bench and started to search for it. During that time, she and I both heard a noise. We could not describe it. Margaret turned and could not see anything and said, "Let's get out of here." We went back to the car and drove around to the park entrance on Shore Parkway. He then said, no, it was at this time that she realized that the bracelet was missing, and we began to search. It was now 12:30 a.m. After the search, we returned to the auto. It was now 12:45 a.m. We remained in the car for about 10 more minutes. The engine was off and we were talking. Just before I was about to leave, a yellow Volkswagen pulled up and there were two people in the auto. They also got out of the car and entered the park. I then left and drove Margaret home. It was about 10 minutes to 1 at this time. I took about 10 minutes to drive her home. She did not linger, blah, blah, blah. Okay. So the first thing I want to notice is that Maury screwed up the time. In this police report, they leave at 12:55, right? Maury has them leaving at 1:15, and I can easily prove that. He says here they leave at 1:15. It says it in black and white. He says they leave at 1:15. They say they left at 12:55. He has them staying 20 minutes longer in the park. I think he did that on purpose. First of all, he lied, right? This is a lie. I mean, John, can there be any other interpretation?
No, that's definitely the same incident. And there was actually, what was his reason for the extra 20 minutes?
He doesn't give a reason. He just says it. He completely screws up their timeline. They were out of that park by 12:55. All right, great. Not that big a deal, but if you think about it, it is a big deal because 20 minutes he puts them 20 minutes closer to the incident. And then he puts the yellow Volkswagen 20 minutes closer to the incident.
As an aside, can I just mention that this is the second yellow Volkswagen? The first one had one person in it with sunglasses. And this yellow Volkswagen had two guys that got out of the car, correct?
Right.
Which were obviously, they were two different yellow Volkswagens.
Unless the guy with the sunglasses picked up the other guy on the way, which is always possible. But that means they were all from Brooklyn. And this cult was supposed to come from Yonkers in North Dakota. But barring that, what I think these people saw was just two people chilling out, hanging out in the park, getting out of their car, going into the park, just like everyone else did at 12:45 that night. I see nothing suspicious about the yellow Volkswagen here. I mean, do you?
No, with the information we have, and quite honestly, that park did have a reputation. Occasionally, there might have been some pot dealing going on. Depending on the time of the night, it wouldn't be uncommon for some cars to pull up, get out, and walk into the park, and probably leave in a little bit. So
right.
We don't have enough information, but there's certainly a lot of possibilities that I'm not.
There's a lot of possibilities here besides the shooters of Son of Sam, Barry Desenko wearing sunglasses from North Dakota. Oh God. I mean, there's nothing suspicious about this police report at all, except for the fact that Maury changes the time.
Yeah, I don't get that. I don't get how that was advancing the story, changing that time. Why did he do that?
Well, my opinion, and this is just my opinion, is if you have a narrative to sell, you have to have things happen closer to the event. The shooting happened at 2:30. If he puts this at 1:15, it sounds a little bit more believable than 12:45.
Okay.
Right? I mean, there had to be a reason he left off 20 minutes. He did leave off 20 minutes. We see here they left at 12:55. They say it in the police report. He writes in the book they left at 1:15. They leave the area at 1:15. I am not making this up. I'm not lying about this. This is in the book. The police report doesn't say anything about that. So what I'm saying about this police report is that not only did Maury lie about this, which means that everything is unbelievable to me now at this point, but also I see nothing suspicious about two people getting out of a car on a what was this, a Friday, Saturday night in Brooklyn in the middle of summer. I see nothing suspicious about that.
It was a Saturday night. They could have been on their way to be going out. They stopped in the park to take a leak, to pick up a nickel bag. Who knows? It could be anything. So,
it could be anything, and it could be the shooters too, right? I mean, I'm willing to go there. People can prove it to me. I mean, we know that Berkowitz gave an exact accounting of what happened, and we know that Berkowitz's car was there. We know that he had no help in any other crimes. So
the ballistics matched his gun.
The ballistics matched his gun. He said that he did everything. He never
originally identified him.
Right. He never mentions a cult ever until Maury Terry comes around. So what I think was that Maury Terry manipulated Cecilia Davis into telling her story about driving away, just like he probably manipulated Tommy Zano to change his story, right?
You have to ask yourself why she wouldn't have told the police that part of the story.
This major part of the story that would have been huge to them.
I know in one of Maury's articles, he insinuated that the police didn't emphasize that part of her story, but it's not in the reports.
It's not in the report.
Yeah.
Right, exactly. And this has been here for 45 years, guys. Okay.
You're going to have to go in the bullshit file. Unfortunately, sorry, Maury, but
I'm putting Cecilia Davis in the bullshit file, and I'm putting his interpretation of the Barnes story in the bullshit file. All right, let's carry on. Now we have Spagnola. At about 1:30 a.m., Dominic Spagnola parked on the south side of Shore Parkway Service Road near where the Barneses had stopped. Okay. So now he's putting them close. This is another reason why he puts the Barnes at 1:15, John, because it puts it closer to 1:30 a.m. when Spagnola sees another VW. Okay. So Spagnola parked on the south side of the Shore Parkway Service Road near where the Barnes had stopped, sees what he believes to be a 72 yellow Volkswagen Beetle parked by the entrance to the playground. It has a black stripe above its running board and what Spagnola thinks are New York license plates. Okay, great. Let's see Spagnola's report. On the above date, Mr. Dominic Spinelli, okay, so now this is Spagnola. Maury changed names, okay? Yes. Interview took place on 59th and 13th Avenue, place of business. Mr. Spinelli said that he was present on Shore Parkway on 7/31/77 at approximately 1 to 1:30. So it doesn't say 1:30. It says 1 to 1:30 when he took note of a yellow Volkswagen having a black stripe running across the side of the vehicle just above the running board. License was a New York plate, numbers unknown. Wait a second. Oh, so he thinks it's a New York, but Spagnola was sure that it was a New York plate.
That's okay. The first time I heard of the black running board, by the way.
Me too.
Yeah.
Nothing further to add of the description of said vehicle. Okay, great. So Maury got this right. But what he did was he cherry-picked the VW sighting to add to the file. But taken on its own, this means nothing. I mean, we just have to admit it to ourselves. He didn't see people. He just saw, and there's two reports, John. Here's another one. The undersigned was contacted by Detective Ryder to interview a tow truck driver, Dominic Spinelli. Spinelli stated that he was parked Sunday morning about 1:30 hours on the Parkway side of Shore Parkway by a hole in the fence when he notices a 72 or 73 yellow VW parked on the playground side of Shore Parkway. He then went on to say that the only thing that he noticed special about the VW was a black stripe on its side. Repeated his story. The stripe was on. He thinks that it was either New York or New Jersey and that he never seen anyone by the car. Okay, so I think we can throw away Spinelli's report. There's a VW there. Big deal. And John, in our next show, I'm going to show you police reports of witnesses who were interviewed that night who were at the scene. I'm going to give you 3 guesses. Guess what car they were driving in?
Volkswagen?
That's it. I found reports from people who were interviewed by the police, who were at the scene, who were witnesses to the shooting, who were at the scene in their own Volkswagen. So Spinelli might have seen other witnesses.
And you know what's funny, Manny? There were also two other witnesses to Volkswagens, but they described them as fastbacks, not bugs. which were
Correct.
different body shape, completely
Totally
different.
different body shape.
And actually, one of them I think was Tommy Zano.
Zano, who knows about cars. Exactly.
Right.
That guy was and is a car expert.
So we
All
have
right.
a convolution of maybe 8 different Volkswagens or cars
Correct.
that look like them, you know.
Correct. Maury is taking my thesis here for the audience's sake is that Maury has cherry picked, selectively edited out and cherry picked reports that confirm his pre-planned narrative and that he would be able to weave into a tale that people would believe. But even with these reports, he has to manipulate and change times and spin things.
Once again, if anybody wants to put together a timeline based on these reports from the police, not
Right.
based on fantasy articles, you know, I'd be more than happy to be proven wrong.
Me too.
But, you know, there's the reports. They're up there for download.
Exactly.
Go at
Well,
it. How
we're
about
not
it?
done. We got Robert Martin. We're not done. Robert Martin, another Brooklyn resident, is at this time driving west on the adjacent Belt Parkway. While passing the pedestrian footbridge opposite the park's entrance, he sees a man standing on the parkway's greenbelt near the overpass. The man appears to be trying to cross the parkway to the esplanade near Gravesend Bay on the other side. He is wearing sunglasses, dungarees, and a white shirt, which is out of his trousers. He is carrying a brown paper bag, an item previously used by Son of Sam to conceal the 44 Bulldog. So knowing Maury's MO, John, and we're going to see this police report, he used this police report because it had the brown paper bag in it. And I guess the sunglasses too, that connects back to the first girl's story. But I found something majorly wrong with the way that he reported this. So here's this guy. So Robert Martin, his real name was Don Sherriman. On August 1st, 1977, the undersigned interviewed the subject via telephone and stated the following. On 7/31/77 at 1:40 in the morning, what time does he have it? He has it at 1:30, okay? So that's fairly accurate. He was driving westbound on Belt Parkway and passing the 17th Avenue overpass when he observed a male, white 30, 5'8", white shirt out of pants, sunglasses, and carrying a brown paper bag under his arm. Unknown male appeared to be attempting to cross the parkway. It is the opinion of the undersigned that the subject has a vivid recollection of the unknown male and attempts should be made at the composite sketch. Okay, so Maury gets the story right. Sort of. There's one major problem that I have. Maury says that he's carrying. Maury says that he is carrying a brown paper bag. Now, I'm just going to say that when I read that, I assumed that he was carrying it in his hand. John, did you make that same assumption?
That's what I had thought. Yeah.
Okay. If anyone's seeing this red light in the back, it's because we have this red light therapy machines, and so you'll see this red light in the back. But anyway, just ignore that.
I just want to say one thing, Manny.
Yeah.
There's a bridge that goes over the highway there from the park. You've seen the pictures of it, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I can't imagine why instead of using the bridge, somebody with a bag and a gun would literally rather run across the highway than take the bridge over it.
Right. Why would you cross the bridge? Right. Why would you cross the Belt Parkway? No less. That's not a 2-lane highway. That's like 4 lanes.
In the morning, in the dark. It's like an easy way to die.
Exactly. But listen, here is a major thing that I think he got that Maury obfuscated. So he says he writes in the book that he was carrying a brown paper bag, but in the police report it says that the paper bag was under his arm, carrying it like this, right? Like this. Would you carry a 44 Bulldog loaded in a bag under your arm like this? I wouldn't.
I would not. But that's how didn't Berkowitz describe that he took it in a bag a couple of times?
He did. So that's why Maury glommed. I believe that's why Maury glommed onto this report, because it had the bag in it and also the sunglasses in it. Okay. But in either case, none of this can be traced to the shooter. You can't.
So this
Maury
is
did it.
1:45 a.m., right?
Correct. 1:40 a.m. So
So we're
my
still at
problem.
least almost an hour away from the actual shooting.
Correct. It's an hour away. Right. So Maury has the shooters coming there early, hanging out, letting everyone see them. Everyone witnesses them. They go so far as to walk on the highway, drawing a lot of attention to themselves. I don't quite understand that, but hey, all right, that's what Maury has going on. And again, I'm finding these little things. Some of them are not so little that he changed in the book from the police reports, and these little things, when added up, create a huge problem. All right, let's carry it on. Now we have the Raymonds. So Mr. and Mrs. Frank Raymond, walking their dog on the service road near the overpass, notice a similar man by a hole in the fence which separates the Parkway Greenbelt from the service road. Notice that they don't give he doesn't give a description. It's just a similar man. Okay. Seeing the Raymonds looking at him, the man ducks back behind some shrubbery. Now, I found some major stuff wrong with this. This is hugely, you're not going to believe this, guys, when you see this. Maury includes the Raymonds as occurring at around 1:30, right? So here's the page from the book at about 1:30. We've already seen Spagnola, the tow truck driver. We've already seen Robert Martin with the guy carrying the bag on the walking on the highway. Now we have the Raymonds. He puts that into this 1:30 bit. He has the Raymond incident occurring at around 1:30. Okay. Here's the Raymond report. Interview of Miss Raimondo. On 7/31/77, the undersigned interviewed the above-named person, who states that she and her husband had gotten home at about 2300 hours on 7/31/77. That's 11 p.m.
11 o'clock. Yeah.
And that they took their dog for a walk on Shore Parkway. They live on Bay 17th Street in the Parkway. She states that they walked on Shore Parkway to Bay 14th Street, and that there is a hole in the fence between the highway and the street. They observed a male white dressed in dungarees and a gray shirt come from the highway through the hole in the fence. He then saw them and went back through the hole. I located the hole, and it is about 75 feet to the rear where the car was parked across. This happened at 11 p.m. Maury has it happening at 1:30 a.m. It says in the police report right here, I didn't change anything. I want people to verify my stuff. It says here 2300. Unless I am mistaken, that is 11 p.m., 3 hours before the shooting.
No, you're definitely not mistaken, man. That's what it says. Yeah.
And it's not a similar man. Dungarees and a gray shirt. Let's see what Barnes saw. White shirt, sunglasses. He doesn't even say anything about dungarees. And how come the Raymonds didn't see sunglasses if they saw a similar man? Where'd the sunglasses go? You know, John, this is the first time that in history this has ever been done. You realize what we're doing here.
Absolutely.
That in real time we are demolishing this story piece by piece.
You know, I almost think maybe we should write it out on a timeline in print, so if people see all the contradictions and the coincidences, it'll be easier to process.
Exactly. Oh, you said process. that means something. That means something. We're involved.
Protecting the process.
Yeah, we're protecting the process, right. And my dad, the Operation Mockingbird military intelligence handler of David Berkowitz. All right. So we've already shown that the Raymonds, Maury puts this at occurring at 1:30 a.m. Here it is in black and white for you guys to see. I'm not lying. 1:30 a.m. in the book. Here it is. The Raymonds right here as part of this whole 1:30 bit, right? It actually happened at 11. So we can take the Raymonds out of the story completely. Their sighting is of some guy 3 hours before who was not similar to the sunglasses guy on the Parkway, who was not carrying any bag or anything, right? And who cares if some guy at 11 p.m. is going through a hole? It means nothing. It literally means nothing. All right, we're not done. The Vignottis. Mr. and Mrs. Frank Vignotti, a young couple, are parked a short distance east of the park entrance near the fence and overpass. While talking, they watch a man coming from their left walk off the Parkway overpass, returning from the Gravesend Bay Esplanade. So now wait, hold on, John. I'm confused. So the guy was on the highway before, crossing 6 lanes of the Belt Parkway,
Right.
but now he's using the footbridge. Okay.
That's
So he
that's what I was trying to say before. I can't imagine why whoever this person was chose to run across the highway instead of just walking over the bridge. But there
I
you have
know.
it. He did both.
All right, so he walks in front of the Vignottis and crosses the service road to the Yellow VW. He approaches the driver's door and stops as if to open it, but he now notices the Vignottis and decides to enter the playground instead. He is white, stocky, and short, about 5'7", with dark, short, cropped hair. He is wearing dungaree pants and a light-colored shirt, which is tucked into his trousers. The shirt's long sleeves are rolled up. His arms are well-defined and muscular. He has a golden tan. So there's a lot here we can verify. Maury wrote things in black and white, right here. Let's verify it. Let's see what the Vignottis actually said. Okay. So the undersigned P.O. Wendling canvassed the following location and spoke to Frank Vignola. He stated to the officer that on July 31st, 77, at approximately 1 a.m., wait a second, 1 a.m., he has them, hold on, does he have them in the, yeah, okay, so he has them at about 1:30. So now he's off by half an hour, but let's just continue. At approximately 1 a.m., him and his wife were parked at the lamppost where Robert Violante and Stacey Moscowitz were later shot. Frank Vignola and his wife were parked in this area from 1 to 1:30. All right, so there's the 1:30. While parked at this location, Frank Vignola observed a male white, about 28 years of age, 150 to 160 pounds, small but stocky with black hair. This male was wearing dungaree pants, white shirt, rolled up sleeves. The shirt was in the pants. The male had walked from the overpass of the Belt Parkway and passed in front of Frank Vignola's vehicle and then walked across the street to a yellow Volkswagen, which was parked in front of the entrance to the park. He stopped in front of the door of the yellow Volkswagen for a moment and then proceeded to the entrance of the park. Frank Vignola said the male walked into the park. Okay, first of all, Maury has the guy going into the park after he notices the Vignottis, right? It says there he notices them and then walks away. They didn't mention that.
Yeah, as if he made the Vignottis made him out, so
right.
changed his mind not to get in the Volkswagen.
It says nothing of that here in the thing. It just says he stopped in front of the door for a moment and then proceeded to the entrance of the park. It's nothing suspicious at all. They didn't mention them noticing him at all. This is a major changing of this report because he changed it, John, to then make it seem as if this guy was guilty. Uh-oh, they're looking at me. I have to now leave this Volkswagen and go back into the park, right? It's saying no, and there's no mention of a tan. The Raymond's here, right? He has a golden tan right here. It says very, very prominently, well-defined and muscular. He has a golden tan. It doesn't say anything about well-defined and muscular in here or about a golden tan, but there's actually two more reports. Okay, about 1 a.m. on 7/31/77, she was with her husband, Frank. And again, this is the wife now being interviewed, not the husband, Josephine Vignola. And they were parked in their car, a 1973 blue Buick on Shore Parkway in the street where the .44 caliber shot the couple in the car. She said they saw a male, white, 30, 5'9", 170 to 180, with dark hair, wearing a white shirt with the sleeves rolled up in dark-colored pants, come off the footbridge that crosses over the Belt Parkway and walk over to a yellow Volkswagen that was parked on Shore Parkway Road. He went to the driver's door as if he was going to open it and then turned away and went into the park. She thought it was strange that he would go to the Volkswagen and then after seeing them go into the park. Okay, so here it says after seeing them. All right, fine. That's where Maury got it. But it doesn't say it here. But all right, all right. So we can say that Maury took that legitimately. I think he spun it a little bit, but I think he took that legitimately. Still no mention of a rolled up of muscular arms or a tan. Okay. Now, why would it be so important for there to be a tan and muscular arms? I think because
it doesn't look like Berkowitz.
Exactly. Okay. He said he was a wife at his car and they observed a male come off the footbridge, goes over to the top of Belt Parkway and approach a yellow Volkswagen that was parked. The male he saw walk to the driver's door of the VW and then seemed to change his mind, at which time he walked around the front of the car and went into the park at that location. He felt that this might have something to do with the 44 caliber killer. Interviewed a day later, still no mention of a tan, and quite honestly, I think the jury's still out on whether he noticed them or not, because it doesn't say that here. 2 out of the 3 reports mention nothing about him noticing them. Okay? So I think that this is just, you could just chalk this up to, they saw a Volkswagen. Big freaking whoop. As we're going to see in the next show, there were like at least 2 Volkswagens on that scene with people who were then interviewed by cops. And they were like, yo, we were in our Volkswagen. It was a, you know, like I have 4 people in a Volkswagen. So
apparently it was more common a car than I remembered back then. But I do remember seeing them as a kid all the time.
All the time. I remember up in the Bronx.
Punch bug whenever you saw one.
My parents had 2 of them at one point. They loved that car. So I think what Maury was doing was finding the reports that he could possibly use to cherry pick to put together a narrative about this yellow VW. But as we're seeing, these reports that he actually used to put together this part of the book really say nothing. They don't weave the story that Maury was trying to put together, at least not to me.
No, I mean, you can spin them the way you need them. But quite honestly, Manny, what really bothers me, and it actually almost makes me angry, is the fact that the Cecilia Davis, the second part of her story of Berkowitz leaving, is completely missing from any police report. Honestly, that bothers me, because if Maury Terry actually fabricated that, I mean, that's pretty disgusting.
It's actually, not only did I think he fabricated, I think he manipulated her into telling that story, because the only place where she tells that story is with Maury Terry in his articles and in his in his Unsolved Mysteries show or investigative reports, where she's part of that with Tommy Zano, by the way, who then changed his story to say it wasn't Berkowitz, even though he said it was Berkowitz. So I think Maury played a number on these people, Cecilia Davis, Tommy Zano, and he got them to say things that didn't actually happen that night. I really think that that's what happened.
I hope somebody comes up with some evidence and proves me wrong, because it's really hard for me to think that this man was blatantly lie and pull the wool over everybody's eyes. And
I get it. It's infuriating. So just a couple things, John. We have finished for today's material. I've just put out the link. I would love for people to call in, give us your thoughts. And in the meantime, what I would like to do is just basically sum up what we have, because again, this is a classroom on the air. This is a college level PhD course on the Brooklyn shooting. I'm going to give my impression, and then I'm going to ask John to give his, and hopefully we will have, and Eric, I see Eric just called in. Eric, we'll give us a minute. We'll get you right on. Okay. And if anyone else wants to call in, please feel free. We would love for people to call in, especially people who disagree with us. So here's my interpretation, and I'm going to ask John to give his interpretation, and then we'll get Eric on. So my interpretation is the following of what we have seen so far. And believe me, we have tons left to see. We are not done by any stretch of the imagination. We have 2 more shows out of this. We have at least 1 more show out of this, possibly 2. Here's what I say so far after today's show. The Cecilia Davis, you can throw that story in the garbage. It never happened. First of all, in the book, he writes that she was 75 yards away. I always had the impression, and John, in the Unsolved Mysteries show, when they did the reenactment, they were right there at the fire hydrant. But in the book, he says she's 75 yards away, but somehow or other she sees all this detail. That's not possible. Okay. Secondly, the Berkowitz driving away story, that is mentioned in nowhere, especially in the official police reports. It's not mentioned nowhere in the media except for Maury Terry's reportage. The only person who reported on that was Maury Terry. And given the fact that we've already seen that he lied about Arliss Perry, about the mounted dog ear hoax, I mean, how many other hoaxes have I found him in? I mean, it's getting unseemly at this point. I am calling complete bullshit on Cecilia Davis's story, and we have to throw it away as something that we can use to inform ourselves about Brooklyn. Second, Maury Terry, in trying to weave his narrative about a yellow Volkswagen, which was absolutely imperative and crucial for him to do so to prove his cult thesis, he cherry picked reports out of 300 pages of police reports that I poured through. He cherry picked certain ones that he then was able to weave together a narrative about a yellow VW. But even with that, he had to change times. He had to make up words that weren't there. He had to put the guy carrying a bag in his hand when he really carried it under his arm. The steps that Maury took to manipulate and to basically fraudulently put stuff in the book is absolutely disgusting to me. And I am calling complete BS on the yellow Volkswagen, but we're not done. We still have the aftermath to get through. We have all the Alan Masters reports. We have the report from John's aunt and uncle, which Maury completely fabricated in the book. John, your thoughts on what we just saw, and then we'll get to Eric.
Yeah, so apparently Maury Terry sensationalized and customized each report to make it fit his narrative. And up until a very short time ago, I was on board, but looking at everything and, like you said, in totality, I believe Berkowitz parked his car at that pump, had plenty of time to walk into that park, did the shootings. As he wrote about them, he described it in detail perfectly, and hightailed out of there. And I think all these cars and people that were interviewed, and there was some activity happening in the park that night, and it can easily be interpreted as 5 different things.
Exactly. That's the point. We've only been interpreting it through the very narrow filter of they were all accomplices to Berkowitz. But if you start thinking of them as just people partying in the park, right? Maybe a drug dealer coming in and out to buy maybe people coming to buy some weed, it makes a hell of a lot more sense.
It was a lover's lane. It did have a reputation as a weed spot, a pot dealing spot. It was a neighborhood spot that people would just go and hang out and drink in the car or whatever.
Exactly. So hey, John, I'm sorry to cut you off. Please finish.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah, no. So that's pretty much where I'm at.
All right. So let's get the man of the hour on. Eric, I hope you don't mind. I'm not going to do the big flourish. The one, the only, Eric Galati. How are you, Eric?
You're both doing very well. And the only thing that gets me angry is that the police and Terry should have been as accurate as you people. And as when you and I work together, I find it very sloppy.
I don't think the police can be faulted here. I think the police did great. They took all these reports and they ended up finding Berkowitz. But
I mean, the accuracy, was it 5 seconds? Was it not 5 seconds? How do we ever really know? And Volkswagens were very common back then. Very common. They were very, very common back then, Volkswagens. Almost as common as somebody having a computer today.
Right, exactly.
That's a fact. But I don't want to keep you. I just want to say that listening to what Maury Terry did and tying it up last week with Herbert Leifer and that telephone conversation, it's just repulsive. But I also see with him, he's a very sloppy writer, though. Even when you read his letters to Tom McCarthy at Queens County, it's sloppy. It's all over the place. And that shows how his mind would, if not deliberately manipulate, and I do believe he did deliberately manipulate at times, would even get things wrong all over the place.
Absolutely.
He would sell everything. It's like when he told me, Eric, you got to get the new edition of the book. There's a lot more in it. It's only 15 pages.
Right.
And he adds Karen Wallstrom. That's all it is. It's just, and plus what he mentioned, you mentioned before, the process church of the final judgment. Well, why didn't he go interview him? You could have interviewed them just like the Quakers or the Christian Science of the Mind people. They weren't hidden. They weren't a secret society. They were passing out literature like the Hare Krishna people. They were not hidden. So I'm just disgusted. There's not much I can say except just to vent my my logical anger. But I just see the disappointment. I mean, you're great, Manny, and you, John, but I could see how it disgusts you.
It's just become like increasingly hard to actually read that book and forget about verify, just to make a good argument. It's become almost impossible to make a good argument, let alone verify it with evidence.
It's a joke. It's a joke. And the fact that people still defend this guy and call me a liar and call me, all I did today was show you police reports and media reports. That's all I did. I mean, and I showed you everything that he got wrong or changed. But in either case, Eric, thank you so much. You and I will talk tomorrow about our Sunday show. Okay.
Oh yeah. And God bless you, John. I could see how serious you are about this, my friend.
Thank you, Eric.
It hurts you because there's sincere passion.
We all invested a lot of time in this stuff, Eric. Years and money and time, and it was an interest and a hobby. But
how old was she then?
Who's that?
Cecilia Davis. She was like 70 something, 70 maybe.
Oh, maybe. 70.
I don't know. She might have been 30. People back then looked old when they were young.
Because I found a Cecilia Davis in Brooklyn.
That'd be curious. Anyway, Eric, I want to get to our next caller. All right, Eric. See you. Talk tomorrow.
Good night, Eric.
All right, we got a man who needs very little introduction to the old school heads, but to all of our new and very valued new viewers who have come in the last couple of weeks. This man was an absolute and is an absolute legend to this video series. The great one himself, Mr. Jim Fay. How are you, Jim?
Okay, how are you?
Doing good. So what are you thinking?
Well, what I'm thinking is that something very obvious popped up to me after seeing the police reports and the what appeared in the book, is that Maury Terry intentionally changed the name of the people he mentioned, knowing that he would contribute to them something that may not have happened, or changed it to fit his intent in the book. He couldn't put their real names in there, even though they were public information if they were on a police report. So he had to change the name and add asterisks to it so he could fit what he proposed they said.
Interesting. Yeah. So this gave him plausible deniability or an excuse to.
Sure. If somebody said, "Well, I didn't say that to the cop," well, I was talking about you. I was talking about another guy,
somebody else, right? And he never expected that the public would see these police files and be able to fact check them.
I don't think he expected John Rinciari to come up behind him in a bar and say, "Listen, I got a couple of questions about that book."
Oh, I would have loved to have been there that day.
So that was the one thing that I caught at this thing here. I guess we could maybe even say we could relate that back to O'Shaughnessy. What was the name he gave O'Shaughnessy?
Peter
Shane. Peter Shane, yeah. There was a couple of things in there, those of us who knew O'Shaughnessy, a nut job, but I don't think he went this far. Certainly didn't go this far. And he attributed things to him. He obviously couldn't give his name. He couldn't say Pat O'Shaughnessy did this, that, or the other thing. So Peter Shane did it, and left it everybody else to figure it out for themselves.
Right. Yeah, it's disgusting the way that this and what I find crazy is that we all fell for it.
Yeah, well, it's funny you say that. We fell for those of us in the Bronx. We fell for it for the most part until it got to the point where he attributed those of us there, me and Ed Vitowski and those to clandestine meetings and all this other stuff. And at that point, we should have said, this, well, we didn't know about the other stuff. The stuff they wrote about. We only knew but what we knew, and we knew that was false. So we said, that's bullshit. I brought it up, And that one line there he gave in the book, attributing it to the ADA in Queens, that O'Shaughnessy and Howard Weiss were bloodthirsty. Where did he get that from? I don't know.
Right, and they were right, obsessed with death and part
Yeah,
of the blood cult. Yeah, where'd he get that?
Like I said, they both had their issues, but not to that extent.
Exactly.
So
All
I
right,
just wanted to drop in and say that.
Well, we really appreciate it because your opinions here are valued above. Well, you're almost at the top of the list, if not at the top of the list, because you were an actual principal. You were a person who chased David Berkowitz down Pelham Parkway, and for that you will forever be known as a legend in this story.
In the long run, it didn't pay off, but otherwise.
Anyway, Jim, so hopefully we'll talk soon and we can put together a show. Okay, my friend?
Okay, thank you.
Good night, Jim.
Good night. Nice seeing you again.
Okay, take care, Jim.
Bye-bye.
All right, John. Well, final words for the audience, and then we will we'll tell them that our next show is coming up very soon because I'm hot on this, and I think the audience is too. And so we'll probably schedule a show for either Wednesday or Thursday. But why don't you tell the audience your final words for today, and then I'll sign off.
Yeah. So I appreciate all the homework you did, man. You really put a lot into this. I reviewed some of the documents as well, but it's. I hate to say that I'm frustrated or disappointed, but at this point, I can't believe the Cecilia Davis story any longer. I do believe she saw Berkowitz.
I do too.
His car. But as far as the leaving the scene and chasing the police, and he wants it to coincide with his timeline, and I just don't believe that happened anymore. And so
right.
I'm glad that we're getting to go over these documents and kind of sort them out.
Right. And I'm also glad that we decided to break it up because we'd be here for another 3 hours. And I don't have the energy for that. So, all right, John, well, listen, thank you so much. Please hang out. I want to say goodbye off the air. I'll be back with you in a minute or so. Okay.
Cool. Thank you.
All right.
Good night, all.
All right. Take care, John. All right, guys. Well, this was just part 1 of Brooklyn. And I think that we did what we set out to do, which was start to dismantle this complete BS story. Berkowitz shot Stacey Moscowitz and Robert Violante. I mean, I don't understand why that's so hard to believe. Talks about it in great detail, admitted to it, never denied it until Maury Terry came around. And we see that once Maury Terry comes around, people change their stories. We already have the example of Tommy Zano, who went from seeing Berkowitz to not seeing Berkowitz to then seeing Berkowitz again. Now we have Cecilia Davis, who told the police very clearly what she saw. The only person she saw come out that night was a woman who removed the ticket from her spot. And she also said that she heard the shots 5 minutes later, not 2 minutes, like what Maury said. And we saw a smattering of all the police reports that coincided to the pre-shooting time of Stacey Moscowitz, the all-important setup period, the period that Maury Terry and his ultimate evil had us believe was the cult getting into place, getting their vehicles ready, finding their positions in the park. And meanwhile, we're seeing that it was just this person seeing this person get out. This person was carrying something under his arm, probably a drug dealer, a drug user. This person was going into the park. Maury Terry completely fabricated the times. He got 20 minutes wrong once. He's 3 hours wrong on another one. This guy was pulling reports to fit a narrative he already had in his head. And as an honest journalist and as an honest reporter and a person who wants to bring you the most accurate information about this case possible, I am absolutely disgusted at this, and it needs to be exposed. So for John Catalano and I want to say thank you so much. This was just part 1. Please be on the lookout for part 2, which will probably be Wednesday or Thursday night. I think it's going to be Thursday. And the reason why is because I am locked out of Twitter until Wednesday. And I always like to make my announcements a day before, at least. So just please be on the lookout for the announcement of the next show. It's definitely going to be this week. And what are we going to deal with on that show? Well, we've brought you up to the moment of the shooting. From that show, on our next show, we are going from the shooting afterwards. It's going to be called The Aftermath. And we're going to deal with the incredibly important testimony of Alan Masters and the chase he had with the VW, because just like we've seen today, things aren't always as they seem. So for John and I want to say thank you so much, and we will see you on the next show. Take care, everybody. We really appreciate it.